this is Erica Norton, and I am the founder of Perfect Legal Video. I'm very excited to have with us today Attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. She owns a real estate and family law firm in the Worcester area, and we are very fortunate to have her with us almost every week discussing topics that are going to help you save a lot of money and help you gain a lot of knowledge. So today we are going to be talking about boundary disputes on the real estate side. And I want to thank you so much for coming on today and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So let's talk about boundary disputes. I mean, you hear so many crazy stories about it, like, oh, that person's branches were in my side and I cut the whole tree down. And I mean, there's like a lot of crazy fighting going on about boundary disputes. And so I'm going to let you start with, some of the first bits of information about, what is a boundary dispute? What are some of the things people are fighting about?
Well, I think it really depends on the people. Again, try to get along with your neighbors first and foremost, because sometimes things are legitimate, but a lot of times it's just, hey, he called the cops on me when we were having a party. So now I'm going to nickel and dime and I'm going to harass them and I'm going to watch them and just stop. Legitimate boundary disputes are one thing, but it's very frustrating when people are just bad neighbors. And unfortunately, we can't get rid of bad neighbors. They are what they are. And if you want to get rid of them, then you have to move. One of you does. But really, it could be anything, exactly what you said. It could be tree branches, it could be a fence, it could be gardens, it could be rerouting your landscape that cause water damage that goes down into drainage in another property because it's a sloped hill. So we can cover the gamut of the things. Most of what we're talking about is first we have to define that boundary line, but then what is it and how is it that we can fix it or fix the problem that's a resulting of your actions.
I mean, that's great. So let's start off with um, how do we define the boundary lines? I mean, I assume that's when they have those people out on the street with their surveying equipment and they're taking pictures and trying to look at a map. Um, what are they doing?
The one thing you don't want to do is look at your plot plan. I got a plot plan when I purchased a property. That's my boundary, isn't it? It's a piece of paper. It's usually a drive-by where they looked and said, yeah, I don't see any fixtures on the property. That's what a plot plan is. A proper survey is what you're actually referring to, where they will go in and they have the little tapes and the little stakes in the ground, like you said, and they're pounding in the ground and they're marking it, and then they're actually going to take the little orange or pink piece of tape and they're going to tape it all the way around your border. So that's what a proper survey is going to do. And we do that because we need to know where our property lines, if we're installing a fence or a garage, or if we have to deal with things of that nature that are structures that are going to be on the property, you want to make sure that you have the right location. Because the last thing you want to do is actually build it on somebody else's property because they can destroy it.
And that's where the real fighting in court happens, right? I mean, and this can happen when you just buy a property and you didn't realize that that shed is actually not even on your property line, or it's in the middle or something. Maybe the fence isn't on the right property line. Uh, what do you see most common happen with these boundary issues?
Again, it depends on how nasty the neighbors are. My take on it is usually, okay, let's just write a nice, semi-nice letter to them, somewhat nasty letter to them. But let's get their attention enough to say, hey, we have an issue with what you're doing, cease and desist or correct. Because that's a lot easier to deal with. as a neighbor, again, you still have to deal with this person, and again, you're pissing them off. They're going to do other things that are going to create more problems, more hostilities. So there's a nice way to go about it, but I think really it's about having that conversation. If you see somebody that's doing a survey, hey, neighbor, what you doing a survey for? What are you going to put up? Have that conversation so that hopefully it doesn't become a problem, because once it's there and it is on your property line, or you think it's on your property line, which is more important, you'll go, well, I have my own survey. I have my own stakes in the ground. Great. And then we're trying to figure out who's really overlapping and which survey is right. So ultimately, it can go into court, and it will be very tedious and very lengthy litigation.
I mean, it sounds like something you would need an attorney for, um, because if whatever that is, that is on the wrong property line is really important to you, then you're really going to have to do your research. You're going to have to know the laws. And who's going to know that better than the people that are in there in court every day, and they understand like the changes in the laws over the years, and they've seen it, they've done it, and they can tell you what the best strategies are.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I was one of those people. I had, I have a duplex, and I had a common driveway. But my common driveway, I had two common driveways. But they weren't really common because one was with my house and the driveways were right here. And then the other one was my house is here, and then these two driveways are way over here, separate. And I realized when I did my survey, because I wanted to put a fence up on that side of my neighbor's property, that I owned the entire driveway. And they were actually parking in my driveway. So I had a nice conversation with them so that they could understand that don't piss me off, because otherwise I won't let you use my driveway. And that's, unfortunately, that's where sometimes it gets to, because, they were arguing with me and they were going, well, we don't want you stepping foot on our property to put up the fence. And it makes it a little bit difficult when you're going, okay, but then I don't want you parking your car in my driveway. So, they realized quickly they should back off of that and let me walk 5 feet on their property to put up the fence on that one section of land.
People get very passionate and unreasonable at times when it comes to some of these situations. And I just remember I was talking to my aunt once. She's passed now, but she was telling me some story about like the branch coming over and the tree got cut down, and I can't remember who did the wrong thing, like who did the cutting and whose tree it was, but her whole face was red. Her blue eyes were popping out of her face, and she was probably like 60-ish at the time and not in great shape, and I was worried she's gonna have a heart attack. And I just was like, well, Aunt Annabelle, but that sounds terrible. When did this happen? It was like 20 years ago. Still that upset about it. And I'm like, well, maybe we don't have a heart attack over something that happened 20 years ago. And you don't even live there anymore. You know what I mean? Whatever. I don't know if they live there anymore, but it was crazy how angry and passionate people can get when they
They,
think that they're being wronged or someone's doing something on their property.
they absolutely can. And I think, the reality is what people don't understand is, yes, you're allowed to cut the branches on your side of the fence, but you can't do it to the detriment of the tree. So you can't cut all of the tree branches to the stump, and so that now the stump is dead because it has nothing to go over. You got to be reasonable. So that's where it's a little frustrating, because the other part of that is great. It's on my property, but it's a neighbor's tree, and the neighbor's tree branch falls on my property and destroys my house. Guess what? I get to go back to the neighbor. So you don't own the tree. You don't have an obligation to cut the tree. But if you do have an obligation to cut the tree and you want to cut the tree, you don't get to destroy it. So kind of a double-edged sword there.
I mean, we had a situation where we had some windstorms and the trees were falling all around us. And we actually, at that same place, well, not where my aunt was, but at my last house, the neighbor behind me and I, we ended up splitting the cost to bring the tree down because it was on their property. Um, but it could have fallen either way, I think. And they were just nice people. So we each paid 650 and got that tree put down.
And sometimes that's the best way. But again, it's a little bit harder when you purchase a property and your plot plan says everything looks good. But again, not a real survey. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to put this up on my property. And your neighbor goes, no, that's not your property, that's mine. Or that garage is on my property and you need to remove it. That's where it gets a little dicey because then it really boils down to do a survey, who's right, and the person that's wrong needs to move it, whatever it is. Otherwise, the person that's right gets to destroy it.
Now, are you actually uh, responsible for tearing down a garage and making their property, the way it was supposed to be? If I, I mean, I guess that would depend whether you built what depend on whether you built it or somebody else built it, I suppose. But what do you think?
Doesn't matter who built it. If it's on another person's property, you don't have the right and they have the right to remove it. The problem is they have the right to remove the stuff that's on their property. So if you're talking about a fence, it's a little bit easy because, right, the fence is vertical and we don't really have much space. So if it's on your property, it's on your property. If it's a garage, what are you going to do? Destroy this much of the garage? I don't think so, because then when you destroy a little bit more, now you're destroying their property. So it becomes a little more dicey, right? So it's really something that you have that conversation. And sometimes the better way to do it is go, okay, I'm going to give you an easement over my property for that much of the garage that's on my property. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do is if you build a new one, you're going to move the garage. That's a proper solution. The neighbors can work something out. Nobody's harmed. There's no damage, and you can go about. But again, that's if you can actually act like adults and coexist next to one another.
Ugh, I know. And I sometimes I wish when you're gonna buy a place you could interview the neighbors and you probably could go try to meet some of them, but it just you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know well, everything there is to know about your neighbors and um yeah, that's why I just moved to the country.
I don't know that that solves the problems, but yes, it's definitely an option. But it's always funny. Like when I was house hunting, I looked and went, "Oh, let's see what the neighbors look like." And you're sitting up on a deck and you can perch over and see. You want to check out your neighbors, check out, see if there's junk in the backyard or front yard or things of that nature because it is telling. Um, it's just one factor, but it's certainly something that I'm buying this house. I plan on living in it for the next 20 years. I kind of want to have a good neighbor.
And that's a really interesting point that you make because there are some neighborhoods that actually do have rules about the appearance of your place. And um, I mean, I just remember in Canton, I lived on a scenic drive, but at the very end of the drive, there was an auto body shop, and the guy just would park in all of these junkers, like out there. There'd be like 20 or 30 junk cars at the end of this beautiful street. And I know that the town was constantly fighting with him about that. He did get rid of some of them, but a lot of those auto body shops, they have junk cars so that they can just grab parts from them if they see anything that might fit what they're working on and try to find a cheap solution for their clients. So, um, just really interesting and the fighting. You mentioned runoff going into somebody's yard. I mean, I talked to somebody who built themselves a nice big garage for their equipment, and they had to put in, I think it was like a 50,000 or $100,000 irrigation system under the ground so that the runoff wouldn't put a puddle in their neighbor's backyard.
Absolutely. And, a lot of times when you're doing big projects like that, you are going to have to get permission. But, if you live next to a conservation or something, you can't change the topography of your land because it does have effect. It does have an issue with the runoff. And then if you're running off and you're running off into a stream, you have even more issues. So again, I had issues with somebody that was doing that and they're dumping and now the runoff is moving right into a stream. Well, guess what? You're going to be fined for stuff like that. So, you kind of have to think about your actions before you go and do something.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. You really gotta, look at what you're doing and make sure that, it's legal and you're doing things within your legal parameters of your property and, all of that. Are there any other interesting things that have come up that we haven't thought of yet?
Well, we could have a field day with this because it's really the sky's the limit. But, people just posting signs on my property, do not trespass. Oh, well, that's not my property, that's your property. And you'll have that back and forth. People uh, doing flower beds that they don't like because I don't want those flowers. I'm allergic. They're going to make me sneeze. I mean, it's kind of the gamut of what I could tell you. I've had people that were in, again, kind of a homeowners association complex area that had restrictions. And one of the things was, we had to have access to a beach. And so, well, you can't put a ledge here for, again, for the runoff because it has to be 2 feet over because we need to have this beach access, even though there was still enough space. So you run into a lot of these issues depending on the dynamic of the property or location, again, what you want to do on it. So moral of the story is when in doubt, check what you have and do a survey, have that information to know it to be true and accurate before you take the next step, because unfortunately that could be very consequential.
So yeah, so that's very interesting. And I would suggest to people that do have questions on this topic, or the best time to ask those questions are before you buy a property if you can, because you want to know if you're going to have a fight later, or and it could have been a fight that was ongoing from the people that are living there now, or lived there before. It could be just something that you're going to end up in court with. You didn't even realize that there was an issue. Now, I know when you're going to buy a place, there's actually good faith, right? Good faith documents that you sign to say that you don't have knowledge of, uh, you know, lawsuits and that sort of thing against you on the property.
Yes, generally those types of language are put into a purchase and sale, and unless it specifically states that this paragraph survives closing, then my obligation terminates the day I sign the deed over to you. So good luck with that. Um, and you will have parties that will file a lawsuit or file some kind of demand against you, but the question is who wants to be in litigation? And so now you run that risk if you don't have language in there that at least protects you.
Well, this has been very interesting, and I hope that everyone listening out there realizes that, just picking up the phone and getting a meeting and discussing what your options are is the best thing, because you don't want to get stuck in a battle pouring money into, lawsuits if you don't have to. And sometimes, like Nicole says, it's just, can you be a good neighbor and just compromise? And so that's really one of the best ways to solve a problem like that. But if you have to go to court and you have to discuss things before you go to court and see if there's a way that maybe you can mediate the situation, it definitely give Nicole and her team a call. They are very knowledgeable and great at what they do. And I know that they will help you find the right strategy for you. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate, all of your hard work and research and experience and letting us know what's been going on in these different areas of the law.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome, and thanks everyone for watching. Have a great day.